Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. This is episode 108 with today's guest, Teresa de Grosbois.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
My name's Adam Franklin, and welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web, and I'm going to take you behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments. We're going to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. The show is brought to you by our book, which is called Web Marketing That Works, Confessions from the Marketing Trenches. And there's a gift for you, the listener, and that is the bonus 33 free marketing templates. You can get your hands on those, as I said, for free. Just head over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Okay, so today's guest is a lady by the name of Teresa de Grosbois. And when I say that last name, it reminds me of my French poetry recital in 1992. So anyway, a bit of the French accent there, which I haven't really practiced that much. So I apologize if I've butchered that with my Australian accent. But nevertheless, Teresa is a very interesting guest on the show. She comes from the world of networking, relationships, connecting with influencers. And this is a world that I am fascinated by. Teresa does have a book. It's called Mass Influence, The Habits of the Highly Influential. And it's currently a #1 Amazon bestseller in at least 5 different countries, including Australia. Teresa is a student of influence. She studies it and practices it. And people like Teresa are fascinating to me. And we've had people in a similar mold, in a similar vein, come on the show. People like John Corcoran, people like Judy Robinette and Keith Ferrazzi. And it's incredible to talk to these people and to observe what they do and to study their work, because not only have they got a great network of people that they know, they have huge communities of people that look up to them and would do anything for them. And I love speaking to these types of people because I really like to look at the actual activity that they do. What is it that makes them so likable and so connected and so appealing that people want to be associated with them? And you know, in the online world, it's often difficult to see people face to face, especially when you're in Australia. And a lot of the online world is in North America. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can be doing to form relationships. And I'm a big student of that because it's very difficult to succeed on this journey on our own. It takes a network of people and people to have your back, as Keith Ferrazzi would say. And so today's guest, Teresa, is going to shine the light on some of the things that we need to be doing, some of the things that we need to avoid doing. So with that, let's head over to the show. My name's Adam Franklin, and I am joined today by Teresa de Grosbois. How are you, Teresa?
I'm great. It's good to be here, Adam.
Awesome. Now, you are the author of Mass Influence, The Habits of the Highly Influential. Congrats on the early success of the book so far.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really wonderful watching what's going on with this book. It's pretty humbling, actually.
Now, online influence, how do you define what that actually is?
Well, you know, all of us have some level of influence, right? Whether or not you're talking about getting your kids to stop texting at dinner or influencing an industry or an organization. Mass influence is really when you move into that realm where you have a large number of people that will follow when you speak, right? So mass influence can be anything from having a best-selling book to having an awesome podcast like you do. It could be having a great blog that people follow. It could be just having a large social media following. But anytime you're in a conversation and you've got a lot of people that know, like, can trust you, as we say in the marketing world, then you've got mass influence.
Okay, so are the people that you're influencing, is it more about whether they read or interact or buy stuff from you, or is it more passive than that? Is it just having that audience in the first place?
Well, it really depends on what you want to achieve, right? I mean, if you're wanting to create influence for business, and I really did write the book for entrepreneurs, then ultimately at the end of the day, you want to build strong enough relationship with people that they will ultimately buy from you. But truthfully, the principles of influence work the same no matter what realm you're delving in. So even if you're wanting to create political change or change a legislation, the habits of the influential tend to stay the same no matter what realm you're talking in. But of course, the book is targeted for entrepreneurs. So a lot of the examples I use in the book are more appropriate for people in business.
Okay, so what are some of these habits of influential people?
Well, the most foundational one would be that highly influential people tend to solve a really big problem for others. You know, they stand in really being the solution to something big, but they do it in very specific ways. You know, and if you think about some of the most influential people of our time, like, Gandhi or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther King Jr. really stood in the biggest problem going on in the planet at the time, which was racial inequality. But he did it in very specific ways. He, created the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. He created the march at Selma. So when you see entrepreneurs doing similar things in business, basically, the ones you see who are highly successful are the ones that stand in the face of something that's really a burning problem for people. And they give them very specific, easy to wrap their heads around solutions to that problem.
Interesting. So it's much more about helping lots of people than it is just blowing your own trumpet, so to speak.
Yeah, in fact, influence is the opposite of blowing your own trumpet. And not that you don't need to have self-confidence to have influence. So, I mean, certainly if you don't have the confidence to speak about your work, it's going to be very difficult for you to become influential. But one of the most important premises of influence is that you can't make yourself famous. You can't make yourself influential. Influential people need other people to do that for them. So one of the key habits that you see of highly influential people is that they're masters at building relationships, especially relationships with other influential people.
That is fascinating. Now, I've got a couple of questions about how to connect with influencers later, but let's touch on some of the misconceptions about influence for a sec, because I suspect a lot of people would think that influence is a sort of self-centered thing and not necessarily about helping other people. And I love the fact that you said you can't make yourself influential, just like you can't make yourself famous. It takes more than just you. So what are some other misconceptions that you come across or things that people do wrong when it comes to trying to become more influential?
Well, I love it that you asked that. And I know this is very similar to some of the things you teach, Adam. I love what you teach in this regard. Because, a lot of people have this paradigm that their social media, for example, or their tools of influence are primarily to sell them. And so a lot of people resist going on social media, or they resist a lot of the tools that would make them influential because, they're worried about, I don't want to have to go out there and toot my own horn all the time. That's going to sound arrogant. And your instinct is correct. Your social media is not to sell you. Your social media is the equivalent of the apple pie that you might take the new neighbor when you want to meet the new neighbor, right? Your social media or your newsletter or your blog or whatever, although you might talk about your own work on there as well, I'm not saying it's wrong to do that. It's actually of far greater importance in terms of helping you build relationships with other influential people. So the more you shout out and endorse other influential people, the more you help others who are, doing similar work to you. And it's not about being inauthentic and smarmy. It's about authentically endorsing people you do respect and admire in terms of the work that they do. The more you do that, the more influential you become because, just like you want to get respect, you got to give respect. If you want to get influence, you've got to give influence.
That's an awesome way of looking at it, shining the light on other people, not just purely because they deserve it and because you admire them, not because you expect it in return, but just to be generous and respectful and shine light on the other people in the industry. That's a really cool way of looking at it. And social media is perfect for that because one of the things I found really effective has been literally just when people retweet something or mention me in a tweet, then I'll literally try and reply to all of them and just ask them a question about themselves. And instead of just actually saying, instead of just leaving it at thanks, I'll actually, if I've got time, which is I make time for it, is I'll check out their profile, I'll see where they live, or I'll see what business they're in, and simply just taking that extra 20 seconds of effort to ask them then a meaningful question like, how's everything in Alabama, or how's everything in Canada? Just little things to show you've made that tiny bit of effort and taking an interest in them. It has had a very big impact because, again, I think you're just forming that slightly stronger connection. And if you do that on a regular basis, I find that can have a pretty big impact.
Yeah, I love that you raised that point because, if you want to know how to be influential, watch what the influential do. And there's a lot of people, like you, Adam, on, not only online, but podcasting. And if you watch the way they behave, they're constantly shining a light on other people that they respect and admire, right? And it's not about, like, authenticity is also one of the key habits of influential people. So it's not about playing with people where you've got to hold your nose and say, oh my God. It's about really finding those people where you say, wow, I love their work. I actually turn down interviews on any given month, but Adam, I would come on your show anytime because I love what you teach, right? And so it's really important that you think about, who do I really resonate with? Who do I want to build relationships with? And as you say, it's those everyday, hey, how are things in Alabama? Loved that blog you wrote yesterday. Great work on what you sent out on Facebook. It's those everyday conversations where you just, endorse and respect other people who are out to cause similar change in the world as you are, even if it's just helping one entrepreneur at a time. That's where influence builds from.
Now, you mentioned a bit earlier about connecting with other influencers. What's some of the benefit of doing that?
Well, ultimately, it's way better to have 100 other influential people all singing your praises than you standing there like the lone person on a chair at a networking event saying, look at me, I'm great, right? And, when you think about it in the real world, it would be ridiculous for me to stand up on a chair at a networking event and say, hey, look at me, I'm so awesome. My book's a bestseller in 5 countries. I'm sure not only would people rolling their eyes, any other Canadians in the room would be like shoving me into the alley and locking the door, right? People would be embarrassed of that behavior. And yet somehow people have this paradigm that that's what they should do online or on social media. And it's not the case. You want to know other influential people because they are the ones hosting the parties. And when you come into the party, you want the host to be there going, wow, I'm so happy. Jake is here. And look, Jake has a new book. Everybody, you got to come meet Jake, right? And that's the energy you want to be creating all the time, that you're the gracious host and you're welcoming in all your guests, because then you're the most popular person at the party. And when you're the person who's always throwing the party, trust me, your influence is going to grow.
Right. Very cool. And so can you kick that off by hosting your own parties and essentially, your own virtual party, I guess, but can you start off those relationships with influencers by doing that for them, by inviting them along to introduce them to your audience or that type of thing online?
It's a perfect example of one of the best things you can do to develop your own influence is host your own party. One of the key habits of highly influential people that I talk about in the book is, become a hub for the people in your industry. Whether you're doing a podcast or a webinar series or a physical conference where people actually show up in person, or whether you create a networking event in your city, anytime you draw the influential people together and have an opportunity to shine a light on their work, that's going to actually have you gain the influence of all the people that you help. If you look at who some of the most influential people on the planet are, like Oprah Winfrey would be a great example of that. She became influential by shining a light on the good work of brilliant people all over the planet. And as a result, she built up the influence levels of all of the people that she helped. And now, she's probably arguably one of the top 4 or 5 influential people on the planet.
So we've spoken about authenticity and we've touched on being generous to other people. What are some other of the habits of the highly influential?
Well, I would have to say, I touched on this one a little bit, but I'd like to dive in deeper, that authenticity is one of the key foundational blocks. And when we think about authenticity, a lot of people don't really get what that is. And there's different definitions of it out there, but here's my definition. Authenticity is when your inside voice is saying the same thing as your outside voice. So if you're not doing something you deeply love, then you run the risk of, being the kind of individual who would be, inwardly thinking, oh God, shoot me now, or oh God, I really need this sale. Whereas outwardly you're saying, this is a really great product, you should buy it. And we all know, and we've all seen people who have that kind of disconnect going on. Like, the technical term for that is it lands smarmy, right? And the other inauthenticity you often see people have is that they desperately think they need to work with people because, maybe someone's really influential, but you don't really like their work. But you think, oh boy, they're so influential though, I better get to know them. And then you've got a disconnect between what's going on in your head and what's coming out of your mouth. And trust me, people can tell. You can tell when other people have that disconnect going on, right? So if you're not consistently working with people that you love and admire, and if you're not doing something that you're really fired up about, then you run the risk of being inauthentic, And like, this is where I see one of the biggest areas that trips people up. Because, as human beings, we're all hardwired to have an inner dialogue, an inner conversation that stops us from becoming influential. Most of us invented it before the age of 6 when we were first getting language. There's a lot of psychological research on this, self-limiting beliefs, or some people call them mind viruses. But, the reality is those negative things that we tell ourselves, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good at speaking in front of a group, I don't have enough credentials, those really get challenged when we think about stepping up and playing a bigger game. And they especially get challenged when you think about living your dreams. Your dreams are scarier to you than they are to anyone else on the planet because they're your dreams, right? And there's nobody on the planet that's better hardwired and tailored to live your dreams, because there won't be anyone out there who's more passionate and fired up about your dreams. So the great irony is many people stop themselves from moving into the area where they would be most influential and happiest because of that negative self-talk and that inner dialogue that we all walk around with.
Right. So that inner self-talk and the negative dialogue, overcoming that can be just as big a hurdle as actually, doing all those other things we spoke about earlier, like being generous and reaching out to other people. But overcoming that mental block, is that half the battle?
Oh, I would say that's the biggest part of the battle, because most of us invented that at such a young age that we even forget that there's this little inner child inside of us that's getting triggered and running the show at times. I can actually remember the day I first created my most significant inner conversation, right? I'm not only from Canada, I'm from Northern Canada. I'm from like our equivalent of the backwoods, right? And I remember, I'm the youngest of 9 kids. And there was one day we were, just back from our cabin, and we were standing in the kitchen of our 100-year-old house, tiny little kitchen. And all my cousins were visiting and all my older siblings were there. And everybody's buzzing with excitement because my grandmother's taking us all to the movies, which is a big deal because my staunchly Catholic mother never lets us go to the movies. She's really concerned about the morals of Hollywood movie makers. But somebody's finally convinced her that maybe Walt Disney's not the worst guy. And so she's rescinded and she's letting us go see The Love Bug. And I look across the room just in time to hear Mom say, Teresa can't go, she's too little. And 3-year-old me, utterly devastated, decides I'm too small to play with the big kids. And that inner conversation sticks. But the really interesting thing about, whatever that inner significant inner dialogue that we created, it's not good or bad. It just is, right? So when I step out on stage in front of 1,000 people, you can bet little Tessie's there with, oh my God, I'm too small to play with the big kids. But at the same time, I'm too small to play with the big kids motivated me to become someone who actually pursues influence and studies influence and wants to help emerging thought leaders get out there and create change in the world. So when you actually can sort of fall in love with that little inner child who created that belief, because really that younger version of yourself was just trying to help you. And when you can actually get exquisite at calming that little inner child down and saying, it's okay, I'm 50 and I've got this. You don't have to handle this one at the age of 3. I can handle this one at the age of 50. Then you actually get really powerful at stepping past that inner conversation and really being able to step into living your dreams.
Interesting. So that's powerful stuff there, because we can be our own worst enemy with a lot of that stuff. And it's interesting, sometimes people can say they see potential in you, or you can see potential in other people, but somehow they're being held back, or they don't necessarily believe in it as much themselves. And it can just be something as simple as having to do something, or filling in for somebody at the last moment to give a talk or to go to a meeting or something, and then the penny might just drop and go, actually, that went okay. I'm more than capable of doing this, but I hadn't quite appreciated that in the past. But breaking through those psychological barriers, yeah, it does sound very important.
Yeah, it really is.
Now let's come back now to some everyday practical actionable things that we can all be doing, particularly with what we do online, either Facebook or LinkedIn or our blog. What are some of the things that you do every day, Teresa, to grow your influence?
Well, I have actually a fun little 30-day challenge your listeners can do. You want me to give you the 30-day challenge?
That sounds great. Let's hear about it.
And there's an online version of this, if you want, at our website that we offer the book at. It's called the 30-Day Influence Challenge, and it's just 30 little quick 1-minute videos you can watch that'll give you an idea of something to do that day. But let me give it to you in a nutshell. You want to get how influence works. For the next 30 days, gift out influence 30 times. So you're going to do things like shout someone out on Facebook, find someone influential you want to build a relationship with and offer to share their blog, nominate them for an award, give their book a 5-star book review on Amazon and let them know you did it. There's all kinds of ways that you can gift out influence. So if you're looking for quick and easy ideas, you're welcome to come do it with us on the website. In fact, we gift the program to you when you get an online digital version of the book. We're giving the book away for free right now. So if you go on one of the like iBooks or Kindle or Kobo, you can download a free digital version of the book if you wish. But you can sign up right there if you want the recorded version of the 30-day challenge. But if you give out influence 30 times for 30 days, make note, because watch what's going to happen to your influence as you do that and start noticing what's coming back at you.
So generosity is the name of the game?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because it really is true. You get what you give, and the more you give it, the more you're going to get it.
So cool. So what are some of the things, like with regards to etiquette, what's the right way to go about this and the wrong way? Because I've seen people attempt to do a reach out email, and I've seen people attempt to earn influence or what have you, but they go about it in the wrong way. What are some rules of thumb you've got for us in terms of doing it right, and also what to avoid in terms of doing it the wrong way?
Well, I would have to say the biggest mistake I see people make is what I would affectionately call a premature ask. You know, people always laugh and say, the premature what? But, you know, the premature ask is like the equivalent of that is if you've just moved into a new neighborhood and the new neighbor comes by and the first thing they say is, wow, I love that lawnmower. I just saw you walking up the walk. I can't wait to borrow that. You know, and of course, at that point, you're rolling your eyes back in your head going, who did I just move into next door to? But we see this in business all the time when people meet influential people, right? Now, imagine you're at a networking function, and usually at a networking function, the most influential people in the room would be either the host or the guest of honor, often the person speaking on stage. And you'll see the speaker walk off stage, and there's usually a lineup of people there waiting to meet them, right? And half of them have a book or a CD or a product in hand, and the other half are waiting to offer to buy them a coffee or lunch. Now, you'd think that would be a good thing to offer to buy them a coffee or a lunch or give them a sample of your product, because we learned in networking when you're dealing with people one-on-one that was a good thing to do. But it's almost like that's basketball, and now you've entered the realm of football or soccer, and that etiquette is no longer appropriate, because when you give an influential person a sample of your product or your book or your CD, or you ask to buy them lunch or coffee, it's a lot like going to the new neighbor you just met and saying, oh, you are going to love my kids. You're so going to enjoy babysitting them. You know, because the reality is at that point, the offer you're making is really more about what you want. You want them to read your book or sample your product and endorse you. Them going for coffee with you would be more about you want them to notice you and recognize you. Like, trust me, an hour of Oprah Winfrey's time is not worth the price of your $5 latte, right? And I use the extreme examples so that people get it. But you only have to, call up the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and offer to buy them coffee, and you'll get that there's a different set of etiquette that apply to the highly influential. So when you want to connect with an influential person, whether it's live or online, the etiquette is that the first thing you should be doing is never talking about your work, never asking for their time, unless it's in some means that's going to endorse or promote them. So, for example, it's absolutely fine to reach out to an influential person and say, hi, can I interview you on my show? Hi, can I repurpose some of your content and promote it on my blog? Hi, I hear you're coming out with a new book. Can I promote your book to my newsletter list? All of those things will get you in the door. But the minute that your reach out is more about you, then you're going to run into the etiquette police pretty fast, and faster than you can say gatekeeper, you're going to realize that you made a faux pas.
And can you recover from those faux pas, or have you basically got the red pen through your name if you stuff it up?
Yeah, well, I guess that depends on the individual situation. But, the one thing I do know, most influential people, if they're worth their salt, are very forgiving, and they really understand that people make mistakes. And if they're not forgiving, then they're probably not a good fit for you anyway. And I would suggest that it's probably not a bad idea to move on. So when you make a mistake, own it and apologize and, come back at it with a more appropriate etiquette.
Okay. Are there any other words of wisdom or habits that you'd like to talk about, or anything else you'd like to get off your chest before we call it a day?
I think the one thing I would really love to leave your listeners with is just, really give yourself permission to live your dreams, because that's where you'll be most powerful, most authentic, most effective. But it really does take you getting in action around your dreams. Like, notice if you're saying, boy, someday when I'm influential enough, I'll do blah, blah, blah. Or, boy, why doesn't somebody just do, XYZ? If you find yourself routinely saying those things, that's your clue to what you would actually be a lot more passionate about doing now. So I would just say, get in action around living your dreams, because living the life of your dreams takes action. Otherwise, you're just dreaming.
That's so true. And where can people find out more about your book, Mass Influence?
Oh, we'd love to see you at massinfluencethebook.com. And you can actually get engaged in the 30-day influence challenge that I mentioned earlier. And we've got links to all the different sites that include the book on, Kindle and Kobo and iBooks. And most of the digital sites are now listing it for free.
That is wonderful. Well, congrats on your bestseller status in 5 different countries. And I'm sure that success will continue to roll on. And on behalf of our Aussie listeners and global listeners, thank you so much for joining us on the show and sharing with us all of your insights.
Oh, thank you, Adam. It was totally my pleasure. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It really is important.
Thank you. And that's a wrap for my chat with Teresa de Grosbois. I love those interviews. I mean, to debunk so many of the misconceptions about influential people, that they're out there blowing their own trumpet and beating their own chest, I find it so refreshing and fascinating to hear and to see that they're actually spending most of their time shining the light on others and passing credit where credit's due. And I think Teresa made a couple of good points in the interview as well about, you don't just want to become friends, or you don't want to associate with people just because they've got a big audience or just because they've got a big profile. You've actually got to be genuinely aligned to what they believe in and what they stand for. Because as you said, if you've got to hold your nose while you're near them and you don't really believe in what they're doing, and it's a bit of a stretch and your gut feeling doesn't feel right, then your audience and the people that you hang out with, they're going to notice. So I really liked that reinforcement that, pick your friends, pick the people that you want to form relationships with, and don't just do it willy-nilly. Actually pick people who you admire, pick people whose material resonates with you and whose personality and values are aligned to yours. Okay, so that is everything about Teresa. Of course, her book is Mass Influence. You can find that on Amazon. If you found today's interview valuable, please leave me a review on iTunes or Stitcher. It really does mean a lot. It increases our visibility, and we get to invite more good quality guests and share more insights with you. So thank you very much for listening. If you want to email me, I'm adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au. Tweet me at Franklin_Adam. I hope you've enjoyed the show. And of course, don't forget the templates. Head to bluewiremedia.com.au/book and the 33 free marketing templates from our book are there. Okie dokie, I shall see you on the next show. Cheers, see ya.